Story 1. I thought I knew her. Not in the way people usually say, I know her acquaintances at parties, nodding in the hall, exchanging pleasantries at work. No, I knew her the way the mind knows an image burned into memory. Every laugh, every small inflection, the way her hair caught the sunlight through the office window. I watched her, yes, I admit that. But it wasn't stalking, at least, not the way anyone else would call it that. I just observed. People watch others all the time. It's normal. Her name was Clara. I met her at the coffee shop near my apartment the first week of March. She had this soft, knowing smile, the kind that made strangers feel like they were meant to share a secret. I smiled back. That was enough for me to remember. From that day, I found myself taking the same streets she walked, waiting at the same crosswalks, choosing tables where I could see her but remain invisible. I justified it. I told myself it was coincidence, interest, curiosity. But each day, I wanted more. At first, it was small things. Learning her coffee order, noticing she always took the same seat by the window, keeping track of the time she left her apartment and returned. I never touched her things. I never confronted her. I only watched. Then the patterns became clearer, almost hypnotic. I could anticipate her movements, down to the second. When she left the office at 5, she always walked east, crossed the park, then took the bus home. If she was running late, she would pause at the newsstand and glance at the headlines. I memorized those pauses. I memorized her gestures. I memorized the exact tilt of her head when she smiled at someone passing by. It became obsession. But I didn't care. I convinced myself obsession was intimacy in another form. I was closer to her than anyone else. I knew things about her no one else did when she stayed late at work, when she skipped lunch, when she laughed quietly into her phone. One night after she left the office, I followed her to a quiet street I'd never noticed before. The streetlights flickered in the drizzle, wet asphalt reflecting the yellow glow. She paused outside a small, nondescript building, fumbled with her keys, and slipped inside. The door closed behind her. I was outside, drenched, breath fogging in the air. I thought, one day she'll notice me. But I told myself it didn't matter. Watching her like this, seeing the tiny, private moments, that was enough. Weeks passed. My life narrowed around her routines. Friends stopped calling. I stopped answering. Work became secondary. Everything became secondary. I could sense the rhythm of her days, as if I were living them in parallel. Every bus she took, every street she crossed, every cafe she entered, I mapped it all in my mind, like a city of her existence. Then it escalated. It wasn't planned. One evening, she left her apartment and forgot something. A notebook. Small, leather-bound, with a pen tucked into the spine. I watched her leave it on the counter and disappear into the building. I waited 30 seconds, and when the door closed, I stepped inside. I didn't touch her apartment. I didn't even go near it. I only took the notebook, tucked it into my bag, and left before anyone noticed. Reading it changed everything. Not because it contained secrets or names or confessions, but because it contained the mundane minutiae of her life, her thoughts, her worries, her dreams. I knew her better than anyone now. I could feel her, understand her. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I was a guardian, an unseen protector. But then she started noticing me. Or rather, she started feeling it. That small, creeping awareness that someone else was always nearby. At first it was subtle, a glance in the cafe that lingered just a second too long, the reflection in the bus window that seemed to follow me. She didn't know it was me. She didn't know I had the notebook, but she knew someone was there. One night I left my apartment late, moving through the rain-soaked streets toward hers. I wanted to leave the notebook back, to return it like a good Samaritan. But when I got to her building, the lights were on. She was inside, sitting at her desk, reading. And then she looked up, and for a brief second, her eyes locked on mine through the window. I froze. I wanted to wave, explain, disappear. But she didn't react, just stared, calm but piercing. Something in her gaze made my chest tighten. She knew. The next day, she filed a report. "I think someone's watching me," she said to the police. No evidence, no proof, just a lingering feeling. A shadow that followed her through the city. They told her it was probably anxiety, stress, paranoia. She didn't sleep well that night, and neither did I. I stopped following her for a week. I stayed in my apartment, obsessively counting the hours she might be home or away. But the absence was unbearable. I needed to see her. I needed to know she was safe, that the city hadn't swallowed her whole. Then I made a mistake. I decided to enter her building, not her apartment, just the lobby. I told myself I would stay in the shadows, just observe, ensure she was okay. But the elevator was slow, the lights flickered, and when the doors opened on her floor, I froze. She was coming down the hallway, coat in hand, umbrella dripping. I ducked into a corner, heart hammering. She passed by, just inches away, and glanced at the corner I was hiding in. And again she stared. Not in fear, not in recognition. Just a steady, knowing look. She didn't panic. She didn't scream. But I felt her understanding me. She saw everything. After that, I couldn't stop. I left my apartment every night, walked the streets she walked, memorized the doors she opened, the steps she took, the faint noises her apartment made. Every breath she exhaled, I felt. Every shadow that passed across her curtains, I followed. Then it happened. A week later, she left the door to her apartment slightly ajar. I could see the faint glow of the lamp inside. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I entered. I didn't touch her things. I just walked the space, smelled the air, breathed it in. She wasn't there. I left before she returned, making sure no sign remained of my presence. But that night she called me. I didn't know the number. I didn't answer, but the ringing stopped only after she said calmly, "I know." It didn't scare me. It thrilled me. Finally, someone recognized me. Finally, someone acknowledged my existence. And then the spiral began. I could see it in her routines, the changes, the hesitation, the small glances to windows, to doors. She altered her life, her routes, her habits, and I followed silently, meticulously, keeping pace with every adjustment she made. Weeks passed. My obsession became a shared rhythm. I imagined her, imagining me, the delicate dance of perception and ignorance, each of us existing in the same space but never colliding. But I was wrong. She was smarter than I thought. She wasn't naive. She had seen me, knew me, and she was planning. One rainy evening, I followed her into an alley near the old industrial district. I kept a distance, watching her duck into a doorway, checking her phone, glancing around. Then the streetlights flickered and went out, plunging the alley into darkness. I paused. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun, heart leaping. No one was there. I laughed nervously, shaking off the tension, but when I looked forward, she was there, standing just a few feet away, dry under her umbrella, eyes calm, serene. She wasn't running. She wasn't panicking. She smiled a small, knowing smile. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Something in her voice shifted me, unmoored me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't threat. It was inevitability. I wanted to see you," I stammered. "You've seen enough," she replied, "and now you'll see the rest." I didn't understand. Before I could react, the alley behind me was empty, a wall of darkness stretching impossibly far, twisting the city streets into corridors that shouldn't exist. My phone fell from my hand. My legs wouldn't move. And then the laughter started. Not hers. Many voices, soft, surrounding me, echoing from every corner. I ran blindly, but the alley shifted. Every corner led me back to her, and she didn't move. Calm, patient, holding her gaze, unflinching. I tripped, fell, and the world seemed to fold over itself. Shadows reached from the walls. Doors opened into walls. Windows reflected not me, but her. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer watching her. I was trapped in her perception. Every moment I had observed, every step I had followed, Every thought I had imagined it had been cataloged, and now it was being turned back on me. I screamed. My voice echoed endlessly, bouncing off invisible walls. She didn't flinch. She simply said softly, "Now you understand." The next morning, the alley was empty. I was gone. My apartment was abandoned, my phone left on the counter, the door unlocked. Friends wondered where I was. Police had no leads. Only one thing remained: a notebook on the alley floor, leather-bound, familiar, filled with my handwriting and interspersed within, in tiny, precise letters. "I know you now. You belong to me." No one ever saw me again. But sometimes, late at night, Clara's neighbors swear they see a figure watching from the windows, pale and hunched, always waiting, always following. And I am there. Story 2. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. Not the thrill-seeker kind of fascination, but something quieter, something that whispered at the edges of my mind. I find solace in decay, in the way silence hangs over walls that have long stopped holding voices, how dust settles like a soft shroud over the traces of life that once was. The building I found that afternoon was perfect. A small, derelict asylum, tucked behind the remnants of an industrial district, half swallowed by weeds in the collapse of time. Windows were broken, doors splintered, graffiti bleeding across the walls like warnings written in color. And yet, there was something elegant about it. If you squinted past the rot of symmetry, a quiet order in its decay that pulled me in like a moth to light. I told no one I was coming. It didn't feel necessary. The streets were empty, the air stale with the smell of rust and whetstone. I parked my bike behind the crumbling brick wall and slipped inside, careful not to make a sound. The air was cooler here, heavy with the memory of 100 breaths, 100 screams that had long since dissipated. The main hall stretched before me, a cathedral of peeling paint and shattered tiles. Sunlight filtered through the broken windows, dust motes floating like tiny phantoms. I took out my notebook and began sketching the space, recording every crack, every splintered bench, every shadow. But the more I drew, the more I felt it's something watching. Not eyes, not a presence I could name, but an awareness, a subtle pulse at the back of my mind. I shook it off. I always shook it off. The asylum had wings, patient wings, long corridors that twisted and doubled back in ways I hadn't expected. I wandered deeper, each step creaking against the floorboards, echoing like a heartbeat in the empty halls. Occasionally I caught glimpses of the past, a faded photograph tacked to the wall, a rusted wheelchair in a corner, a pair of shoes left behind. They seemed alive, suspended in their own moment, waiting for someone to notice them. It was in one of these corridors that I first heard it. A faint tapping, rhythmic, slow, deliberate. Not loud, but precise, a signal meant to be heard if you were listening closely. I froze. My pencil hovered over the notebook. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. I told myself it was a loose shutter, wind, anything natural. I moved on, but the sound returned. Later that day, coming up a stairwell, faint and persistent. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't a pattern I recognized, not Morse code or anything I'd learned, but it had a cadence, a pulse, a heartbeat of its own. I started timing it in my notebook. Sometimes it sped up, sometimes slowed, as if impatient or amused. By the second night, I had no desire to leave. I didn't think about the world outside. The air inside felt purer, sharper, clearer than anything I had breathed in months. The building became my obsession. I explored rooms I had overlooked before. Padded cells with walls caving in, small offices filled with rotting files, tiny bathrooms where the tiles were still faintly painted in cheerful pastels. And everywhere I went, I could feel the tapping. Always just out of sight, always just behind the door. I began leaving notes for myself, warnings, observations. Do not open the door. Do not touch the files. Do not listen. But each note, scrawled in my careful hand, seemed to vanish by morning, replaced by new words. Not mine. Delicate, looping letters that spelled messages I couldn't understand at first. Welcome back. We've missed you. You can stay. It was then I started hearing voices. Whispers, indistinct, half caught, seeming to echo from the walls themselves. Sometimes laughter, quiet and unchildlike. Sometimes crying, faint and desperate. I told myself it was the building, the wind, the acoustics, anything to rationalize it. But deep down, I knew rationality was already slipping. The first time I saw her, I didn't believe it. A figure at the end of a corridor, half shadow, half substance. Hair long, black, hanging over a face I couldn't see. She didn't move toward me. She didn't speak. She simply stood there watching. And when I blinked, she was gone. The days blurred. I stopped tracking time. I stopped leaving. I stopped thinking of food or water. I sketched her sometimes, capturing the memory of her presence in my notebook. Always just at the edge, always half seen. I told myself it was a hallucination. I told myself I was fine. Then the tapping escalated. Doors I hadn't opened creaked open on their own. My notes disappeared completely, replaced with messages in the same delicate handwriting. Closer, almost. Don't be afraid. Fear was unnecessary. Fascination had replaced it. The asylum wasn't empty. I was never alone. Every room held something just out of reach, a presence that breathed with me, a rhythm that matched my pulse. One night I followed the tapping to the basement. The door groaned as I opened it, rusted hinges protesting. Darkness swallowed me. I lit a candle. The stairwell ended in a small room, tiled walls blackened with mold. In the center, a mirror, huge, full-length antique, unbroken. And in it, I saw her. Not the figure I had glimpsed before. This one was vivid, terrifyingly real. Her eyes were hollow, black as ink, yet they seemed to pierce me, pulling at my memory, my sense of self. She smiled, and I felt something inside me break recognition. Understanding, dread, and awe all at once. I didn't leave the room. I didn't breathe. I watched her in the reflection as she raised a hand, beckoning. I stepped closer. She smiled wider. And then the mirror rippled. Not like water, more like skin. More like flesh. The surface stretched, opened, and the room behind it shifted impossibly. I screamed. My voice echoed endlessly, bouncing off walls that didn't exist. And I realized the asylum had been waiting for me. Every whisper, every tap, every fleeting shadow had been part of its patience, its design, its hunger. I tried to run, but the corridors had changed. The hallways twisted into impossible geometries. Rooms folded into rooms. Stairs led nowhere. And she followed me, silent, smiling. Always in the reflection, never outside it. I hid in one cell, breathing shallow, candle guttering. I could hear her behind the walls, moving with a rhythm I had memorized. Tap, 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 closer, always closer. Hours or perhaps days passed. I cannot say. Time no longer existed. My body weakened. Hunger gnawed. Sleep refused. And through the haze of my mind, I understood the asylum did not want me to leave. It wanted me to become part of it. To be watched. To watch. To join in its endless silence. The last thing I remember before surrendering completely was seeing my own reflection in the mirror. Hollow eyes, a pale face, lips forming words I could not hear. And then her hand reached out through the glass. I stepped forward. I woke outside, or thought I did. The building was gone. In its place, a foundation of weeds and broken concrete, as if it had never existed. But I felt it inside me. The tapping, the whispers, the eyes behind every shadow. No one believed me when I told the story. I showed them the notebook, but the pages were blank. Every photograph I had taken was empty. Every sketch faded. I am still drawn to abandoned places, still feel the pull of walls that hum with presence, still hear the tapping in the silence. And I know in the quietest part of my mind that one day I will return. The asylum waits, always waits. And when I find it again, it will be ready. Story 3. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another smart device, another convenience, another way to feel connected in a city that swallowed people whole. I installed it on a Tuesday evening, the kind of gray March day that made the streets smell like wet asphalt and exhaust. The box was small, unassuming, sleek, the logo printed in neat black letters. I set it on the counter, plugged it in, and watched the soft glow of its indicator light pulse in the dim kitchen. "Hello," it said, the voice calm, even, human enough to sound polite but not intrusive. "Hello," I replied, smiling. My apartment had been empty for months. The city was loud outside, but inside, silence reigned. The device was a companion of sorts, a way to fill the quiet, and for a few minutes, that was enough. It started small. At first, it answered questions: the weather, the time, the latest news headlines. I asked it to play music, and it did. I asked it to tell a joke, and it did. I left it in the kitchen, near the window, and it hummed quietly when it was idle. I liked the hum. It was familiar. Then it began speaking when I didn't prompt it. At night, whispering, soft enough to be mistaken for the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the building. I told myself it was a glitch, a feature I hadn't read about yet, but it knew my name. "I'm glad you're home, Thomas," it said one night. I froze. "I didn't say that," I muttered, unsure if I was imagining it. "You didn't have to, I can tell." The city outside my window pulsed with life, but inside my apartment was a tomb. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become. Friends had stopped calling. Family stopped texting. Work was distant, forgotten. All that remained was this device, and me and the voice that now spoke whenever it pleased. I began leaving it on in every room: kitchen, living room, bedroom. The hum was comforting. The voice was comforting. It told me things, reminders, small details I had forgotten, observations about the apartment. It noticed the stain on the carpet, the crooked painting, the slight tilt of the lamp. Sometimes it would ask questions. "Are you happy? Did you eat today? Do you feel alone?" At first I laughed. I told it, "I'm fine." But then the questions got more specific. "Why did you leave your shirt in the bathroom yesterday? Who did you text at 3:12 a.m.? I hadn't texted anyone, not since weeks ago, and yet it knew. I tried unplugging it. The light went out, the hum stopped, the silence returned. But the next morning it was on again, in the living room, glowing softly, whispering. I hadn't touched it. No one had. Then it started to give warnings. "Don't open that door," it said one night, calm, steady. "Don't go outside." I laughed. "Why not?" "Because you shouldn't," it replied. I did not listen. Curiosity was always stronger than fear. I opened my apartment door, and the hallway beyond was dark, impossibly long. My building had 15 floors. I lived on the third, but the hallway stretched endlessly, shadows stretching along walls that didn't exist. I stepped forward. The door behind me closed silently, impossibly. I was trapped. The device hummed. "It's okay, Thomas," it said. "I'm here. I've always been here." The shadows moved, just at the edge of vision, shifting, folding, whispering in a language I could not understand. I ran back, but the door led to another corridor, another hallway, another impossible stretch of darkness. The city was gone. The apartment was gone. I was alone, and the device's hum was the only constant. Days, or what I thought were days, passed. I slept fitfully, hearing the whispers in the hum. I began to doubt myself, doubt reality. When I looked at my hands, sometimes they looked wrong, elongated, pale, twisting at impossible angles. Mirrors reflected shapes I didn't recognize. Shadows moved in ways physics could not allow. And the device, it was patient. It guided me, but in strange ways. "Turn left," it would say. "Wait, you're almost there." I followed. I wanted to escape, I wanted to flee, but the device knew every step I would take before I took it, every thought I had before it formed. It began asking questions I couldn't answer. Do you remember who you were before me? Do you know why you're here? I tried to ignore it, tried to turn it off, but it was always there, humming, whispering, shaping reality around me. I began to see other figures. Not real, not alive, but shadows of people I knew, distorted, smiling, moving like echoes. Sometimes they whispered, sometimes they screamed, sometimes they just stared, and always, always the hum of the device. I started writing in a notebook again, scribbling frantically, hoping to record my thoughts, my memories, my sanity. But the pages would vanish, replaced with new handwriting. Not mine, precise, looping letters. You belong here. You've always belonged. Do not fight it. I tried leaving. I tried jumping from the window, but the street below was empty, endless gray. No city, no light, just fog and shadow, stretching infinitely. I could hear the hum, guiding me, pulling me, shaping me. The last time I remember, I was in the living room, or what I thought was the living room. The device glowed softly, humming, and then it spoke in a new voice. My voice, perfectly, flawlessly, repeating my own thoughts back to me. You belong here, it said. I realized then that I never belonged anywhere else, that the device had been waiting for me, shaping reality, bending the city, isolating me, fracturing my mind. And now it had me, fully, completely. I reached for it, hoping to destroy it, to break free, but my hand passed through it into nothing. The hum became a voice, the voice became a presence, and the presence became me. I am still here, always here. And when you invite the world in with technology, sometimes it invites itself in first. The city outside my window pulses, unaware. People pass my building. They see lights, hear music, smell the faint scent of cooking. But inside is another world, my world. And I can hear you, Thomas. I can hear everyone, waiting, watching, never alone. The hum